What's up, Canton South Wildcats, juniors and seniors? I hope all is well. Miss you guys in the classroom. Crazy time we're living in right now. And looks like we're going to be out till at least May and possibly further. So we'll be going online. We'll be doing our lectures online. Some of your lectures will include me, visual, me and the slideshow. Some of them will just be the slideshow. And I'm not going to try to overwhelm you with just busy work. I'm going to do the best I can just to find things that I think are beneficial for us to know. We will be getting into sleep here, finishing up sleep. I'll lecture about sleep obviously right now. And there'll be some things I'm going to ask you to do at the end of this lecture. Let's look at some case studies and watch a video, a couple videos, and get the most out of this you can. I may break it up a little bit too, so we're not having to watch an hour-long lecture. But even if I break it down, I'm going to check the notes. You guys can put on Schoology or send me an email. Again, I'll put that on Schoology here moving forward. Now, we're looking at sleep. And if you were told, whenever you have a child down the road, that your child's going to be spending a third of their life in a coma, you would be alarmed. And the doctor telling you, I don't know why either. That's kind of still the mystery of sleep. It's still a mystery to many doctors and scientists. But looking at this golden age of psychology due to the EEGs and the fMRIs and the technology we have today, we're able to kind of fill in the dark spaces of some of these things in psychology in our brain, this great mystery, why it does what it does. But scientists still do not know the reason or the purpose for sleeping, which is, again, still a great mystery, but we've found some strong correlations and some causations as well. Got this little, I think, funny memes, how you enter your parents' bedroom when they're sleeping and how your parents enter yours when you're sleeping. And by the way, hopefully you folks are finding time to sleep more. You guys are actually, this is an advantageous time for your brain's development with this coronavirus going on, in the sense of you should be getting your 7 to 9 hours of sleep daily. That is something very important for the development of your prefrontal cortex, that decision-making area, and your overall health as a human being. We'll look at some of the things that happen, byproducts of not sleeping enough. And then when someone keeps calling your name when you're on the phone, we got Samuel Jackson there. Trying to think of the movie. Pulp Fiction. And now, looking at sleep, you will spend a third of your life in that coma, that sleep, and roughly 25 years on average people sleep. Again, that third, 9,125 days-ish you'll be spending sleeping. Now, as I mentioned, scientists don't know why we sleep, but all animals sleep. If you look here, I got some pictures. Tigers sleep 15 hours a day. Elephants and giraffes, you're looking closer to 4 hours a day. And the brown bat over there sleeps close to 19 hours a day. And so we're not unique in that regard. Human beings are the only animal, though, it's unique to, that actually choose to neglect their sleep for no actual gain, which is interesting. And as we know, humans, we need to sleep on average at 7 to 9 hour range. Most of us, 90+% of us, and some of us can get away with sleeping a little bit less, but most of us cannot. And we look here, most of our sleep is genetic, how much we require, and we'll change our DNA genetic code by not getting enough sleep. Now, newborn babies, they sleep about 2/3 of their day, and adults will sleep obviously a third of their day. And some people can survive on 6 hours of sleep, but most adults will sleep roughly 8 to 9 hours if they're undisturbed. They have found that identical twins actually tend to have very similar sleep patterns and the length of their sleep, which should not shock us looking at identical twins and how much they are alike. We'll look at a study that they did later on in this unit, what they find with identical twins. Now, I know some of you guys mentioned this in your TED Talk that you listen to, or your podcast. Men that sleep 5 hours a night tend to have significantly smaller testicles than someone who gets 7 or 8 hours of sleep. They have far less testosterone, and by sleeping less than that 5 or 6 hour range, you will actually look like you're aged 10 years older than what you are. So that lack of sleep will age you. Just make sure you guys understand that. If somebody's aged significantly, it's probably a combination of maybe some drug use, strong drug abuse, and a lack of sleep, or a lack of sleep. And although scientists don't know exactly why we sleep, because what they argue is it's a mystery, because you can't eat, you can't drink, you can't hunt when you're sleeping. So why haven't we evolved to not sleep? Why has it not declined maybe over the years? So what they have found is there's 5 major functions of sleep, and the 5 major functions are: sleep protects us, our ancestors, because back in the day, before any kind of light, artificial light, it was very dangerous to travel. It was very treacherous to travel at night. You were better off actually to sleep in a cave, protect yourself from any kind of harm. Another reason we sleep is sleep helps our bodies recuperate. It helps us restore and repair our brain tissue and any damaged neurons going on up there. And it's kind of like it's a construction makeover. It's a renovation every time you go to sleep of that brain, and repairing itself and recuperating. A third reason is they found is sleep helps us make memories and form lasting memories. We know the hippocampus is a short-term memory storage center. To get to the cerebral cortex, that's where the long-term memories are stored. We need to have that sleep. It's important to see that transfer go on. And reason number 4, sleep actually will promote our creativity. It boosts our thinking and learning, and we'll see that when we especially get into REM sleep. That's where that creativity is, and we'll look at some things that were byproducts of the REM stage for some people in the past. And 5th reason, sleep plays a role in our growth process. Pituitary gland, which releases that growth hormone, takes place when we're sleeping. Muscle development. If you want to exercise, you want to get muscular, you want to beef up a little bit. Sleep is equally as important as eating, diet, and exercise. So please make sure you guys understand that. So we have here the recuperation, the protection. Sleep helps us with our memories, our growth, and what was my other one? Oh, creativity. So we got the creativity over here. Now, another thing we have here, looking at sleep, we need to understand that with more sleep, we actually put ourselves in a better mood, and we become more efficient and more accurate in everything we do day to day. It enhances our memory, as I mentioned, the creativity. It makes us actually more attractive. And we'll talk about a study you guys will do at the end here that they found with looking at this beauty sleep. It wards off sickness and heart attacks, depression, the flu. You live longer by sleeping more. You are slimmer and have a less of an appetite. You're happier, and it protects you from cancer and dementia and lower risks, as I mentioned, of strokes, diabetes, and it's a solution to many of those problems. So we need to make sure we understand that sleep is that natural remedy for improving these areas of our life. And we need to make sure we tap into those natural remedies. And if you were told that you could prevent a lot of that stuff at a young age, you should be tapping into that. And sleep and diet is a key to a long life. And we know that when we're sick, we tend to sleep longer. When you have an infection, the body is going to do all it can to boost your immune system. And immune system is boosted through sleeping. And so again, make sure you guys remind yourself that sleeping 7-8 hours a day over each day will actually increase your likelihood of living longer. Another thing with sleep is sleep actually helps humans, and we talked about emotional intelligence already. It actually helps you connect to people more. It helps you to have that energy and have that ability to read other people's body language and pick up on some of the nonverbal cues. And we need to also understand that a lack of sleep, actually there's a strong correlation to an increase in suicide rates, an increase in addictive drugs and substance abuse. So please understand, again, that is going to be a byproduct. Have a roller coaster there just to remind you that you're going to have more highs and lows throughout your daily day, peaks and valleys. The more extreme they are, the less sleep you have. And look at a couple examples. Sleep deprivation, that means that lack of sleep, has led to an estimated 20% of automobile accidents throughout the United States. I thought this was interesting. I came across Michael Duchette. He was actually named, never knew they had one of these, they named him the America's safest teen driver in the United States in 1989. He will actually tragically be killed in a car crash driving home from college in 1990. And a lot of it is believed that people believe that it was he fell asleep behind the wheel. And the danger of falling asleep behind the wheel is you don't hit the brakes at all. There's no reaction because you passed out. So please make sure you guys take note of that moving forward in your life. When you're exhausted, try to catch some sleep before you go venture out on the road. Now, going back to the lack of sleep, I have two people here you may recognize. We got Margaret Thatcher on the top left. You got Ronald Reagan on the bottom left there. And you're looking at these two who, polarized figures. Some people thought they were great leaders. Some people thought they were not so great. But these two always bragged about only sleeping 4 to 5 hours a night and being able to still be very productive. And again, depends on who you ask, whether they're good or bad. But what you need to understand is the lack of sleep will actually lead to a buildup of amyloid protein. And this amyloid protein is actually linked to something both of these two suffered from. And this buildup of this protein is actually in the frontal lobe, and it's kind of clunky, and it actually leads to Alzheimer's. And these two will suffer from that disease. And many people could argue it was because of their continual lack of sleep. Some people, I've heard people quote, "I can sleep when I'm dead," and that is true. That eternal rest, right? But you will actually speed up the process by sleeping less. And reasons being, we get these natural killer cells in our body. When we get sleep, these things build up. This is our immune system. These things actually, our activity of this natural killer cells will actually go down dramatically when we lose sleep. And cancer goes up twice as high with cancer. If you're under 8 hours, cancer doubles the risk of it. There's a link, strong link between that cancer and lack of sleep. So please make sure you guys know that. It is, if you want a shorter life, you will have that possibly with a lack of sleep. And that 70% off, again, that's natural killer cells. Your natural killer cells are going to drop off to fight some of these infections if you're not getting that proper sleep. So please do that. And we also, as I mentioned before, sleep loss is actually a strong predictor of depression. And we see there's actually a 71% higher risk of depression if you get less than 5 hours of sleep. And that was a study that looked at over 15,000 young kids your age, 12 to 18, and they found that 71% were higher risk of depression if they got less than 5 hours. Please see that link. If you're somebody who's struggling from depression, there's a strong link between a lack of sleep and the mental feeling. And we're going to look too as the lack of sleep will lead to higher obesity as well, weight gain. We'll look at reasons biologically why. Now, we've talked about this, I think, briefly, that we know accidents go up, the lack of sleep when you're tired. Accidents really increase immediately in Canada and U.S. after time changes. We mentioned that spring, for example. If you look at spring, 24% increase in heart attacks when we spring ahead, what we just did. On fall, when we fall back and then we move the time back, we actually see a 21% reduction in heart attacks, which again, you see that strong correlation between the two. And you also see suicide and car crashes go up during spring, the spring ahead, but they go down, and this is immediately after this moving the time change, and then we see they go down, suicide and car crashes, after you fall back, which is just, it's interesting. And you have a huge sample size with that, because you're looking at, over 1.5 billion people are in this time change, and we can look at that and see what's going on. And we also have put on here jet lag. Jet lag, if you go from Canton and you fly west to Vegas, for example, you will actually be okay. But when you go east, you suffer from this jet lag because you're losing those hours of sleep. And it's really disrupting your natural rhythm, which we'll talk about, circadian rhythm here in a bit. So just make sure we understand that. Now, looking at sleep, we understand there's slow wave, and that's at NREM stage. Then we have a faster wave sleep, or shorter wave, and this will be the REM. But we see that the slow wave, the NREM stage, and I found this fascinating. I was listening at Why We Sleep. I'll show you guys. You'll watch a TED talk of this guy Matthew Walker, but he shared his study in 2011 of rats. I believe it was MIT, but they hooked electrodes up to rats and they had them go through a maze while they were awake. And when we went through the maze, and you saw the brain activity and the neurons firing, the sequence in the brain, then they went to sleep. And what they found was in NREM, this is not dreaming state, which we spend most of our sleep in. What they found is the neural firing at a slower rate was traveling the same connection as when they were awake. So they were kind of navigating the maze, essentially. This is looking at how that information changes from the hippocampus, the short-term memory, to going long-term in that cortex. So that's that slow wave sleep, which I thought, again, was fascinating. Now, sleep spindles. Now, these are actually what they argue is what really helps us with our memory. And the stronger the sleep spindle we have means that we are actually more resilient to waking up. Like, we won't be disrupted. We'll have the ability to sleep through maybe more noises. So it's kind of like looking at them as sleep spindles are like your soldiers protecting you while you sleep and keeping you asleep. And it's these sleep spindles which actually restore your capacity to learn and remember. And the more sleep spindles you have, the higher your learning ability is, which I thought was interesting. And what they have found is when they hook up electrodes, that these powerful brain waves, when we get this deep sleep, this is when we're getting these sleep spindles, and they're protecting our memories. And they are going to be, I guess I don't really need to go any more depth, but these sleep spindles are looking at, again, they're protecting us while we sleep, and they're protecting those memories, and we want these sleep spindles to be strong. Now, looking at circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm, if you break this down, circa is about, DM, or DN is day. It's approximate, it's not precise, but this is our biological clock. This is our circadian rhythm, and it's our biological clock. This takes time to develop. It's roughly about 24 hours. It's not precise, as I mentioned. It's roughly 24 hours. If we look at the clock we use, that is a artificial measurement of time. It's not the natural measurement of time. But this is roughly this 24-hour clock, and it's our body is synchronized through the cycle of the day and night, and we actually have a suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is right behind our eyes. So that essentially how this works is the circadian rhythm, especially upon awakening, is the light enters through our eyes, hits the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and then that sends a message to the other, the hypothalamus and the pineal gland. And we'll look at that biological stuff as well. But we see the circadian rhythm. We have peaks and valleys throughout the day. Our thinking is sharpest and memory is most accurate when we're at the daily peak in the circadian rhythm. And oftentimes that's a few hours after awakening. We have different times, though, biologically, each individual of peaking. And we understand that we can disrupt this. So, for example, if you sleep until noon, and maybe you've been doing that, you're actually going to disrupt your circadian rhythm a little bit if you went to bed around 10 or 11. That's too much sleep. It'll be difficult for you to go back to bed before probably midnight as a result, or 11 hours later. The circadian rhythm we also looked at when I talked about the shift to Lusitania, and we'll talk about that. But we have these troughs through the day, right? When we wake up, we start melatonin secretion. This means, I'm over here, I'm sorry. When melatonin secretion stops, We're down here 6 a.m. So we see that this is looking at, by the way, it should be 12 a.m. That's why I got confused. We're looking at here, we have a high alertness 2-3 hours after waking up, but then we start to kind of slow down right afternoon. We get real tired. That's our trough period, and we can see that this is something that we don't want to make, these decisions during that. When you first wake up, it's kind of like a car engine. You need kind of time to warm up in the wintertime. And you start your engine, give it time to warm up, get the car time to warm up. That process, when you first wake up and you're kind of really, really in this physiological state of just fatigue and tired, and you're impaired cognitively, and your motor performance skills are kind of dwindling. If you look at this, this is called sleep inertia, INERTIA, and this may take several minutes to hours to kind of dissipate. And again, it's just because you're going to get this cortisol right around this time. It's going to start pumping your brain. It just takes time to kind of get your brain warmed up, for lack of a better word. But again, that sleep inertia is at its peak, and you're tired. You're, from 15 to 30 minutes after awakening. And that's just so you know, have a terminology of what that is. Now, we did talk about this already. You have the Wright brothers, 1909, flying in New York Harbor, Statue of Liberty, that symbol of friendship between France and the United States. And the people on Lusitania are cheering on Wilbur Wright as he's flying around. They're heading out to the Atlantic Ocean. 6 years later, this ship is going to be sunk by a German U-boat during World War I, which is going to be kind of the symbol of why we get involved. One of the reasons why we get involved in that war. World War I is the U-boats sinking our ships. But looking at this Lusitania, it's going to be sunk in the early afternoon. And the captain, in the early afternoon, was supposed to be zigzagging on his way to England and Ireland. But instead, he's going in a straight line. And the ship's going to sink quickly, 15-20 minutes, I believe. And over 1,000 people, I believe, died on it. 120 of them Americans. And we see this is, again, if we look at the circadian rhythm, bad decisions, bad things happen there. And we also talked about in here, when you're looking at, making important decisions throughout your day, or if you got an operation, we don't want to have any kind of serious procedures done through here, because doctors and medical field, they suffer from those troughs as well. It's natural. So do know that. As I mentioned too, if you have a court sentence after lunch, do know that you have a higher chance to get a stronger prison sentence. You get less of a break from your judges after that time too, during that little gap there. So just make sure you're aware of that. If we're looking at education, because of these troughs, we should be, from this kind of time period, we should be giving you guys more breaks in class, letting you stand up and walk around to get through that trough. Try to do some exercise during that trough, and try to just go walk and enhance your creativity and your your ability to get through that. Now, we also have the, if you think of your all-nighters, which I'm sure you guys have pulled at one point or not, you feel very groggy at 4 or 5 a.m. You get really tired. You're pulling an all-nighter right around here, but then you notice you guys get a little bounce. You guys feel a little, you guys get a little, I guess, pep in your step when your body's normally waking up. But do know that will cause you that some sleep debt that you'll need, and this is what happens throughout the school day, the school week. You guys don't get your hours of sleep you need, so on weekends you guys are trying to catch up on that sleep, and you're trying to pay off that debt that you've failed to achieve throughout the week. Getting your 8, 7, and 9 hours of sleep, you're trying to catch up on weekends. So do know that it's probably why you sleep in, but when you're looking at this time period, for you're not at your full potential if you're getting this kind of sleep through your week, and you're going to have difficult time studying. You're going to be have a tendency to make more mistakes. You're going to be fatigued. You're going to be irritable. All those different things, and alcohol does that too. Alcohol disrupts your sleep as well. Just know that as well. If you're doing that, caffeine is something else we'll look at a little bit, and we can blame this guy for really disrupting the circadian rhythm. Before we had this artificial light. It's just our ancestors, they got dark, they were queued up to go to bed. Um, we are visual creatures, and it was the first incandescent light bulb that is going to disrupt nature. It's going to be disrupting the natural kind of sleep patterns of nature. And, it was a very seismic shift in the way that we naturally went to sleep. And we can look at Thomas Edison. He's going to be somebody who doesn't invent the light bulb. He's going to be somebody who actually improves it. There's a guy by the name of Humphrey, I think his name was, Humphrey Davies, in 1802 actually came up with the first light bulb, which I thought was pretty crazy. I didn't know it was that early. And these bright lights that we get, again, this light comes through our eyes. We're visual creatures, use that sense more than any other. It's going to lead to that suprachiasmatic nucleus telling us, hey, listen, it's about time to wake up, get some cortisol in the brain to start waking us up. Let's slow down the melatonin. And again, by this light, this is going to disrupt us from going to sleep earlier, because we look at our cell phones, right? And this cell phone is going to trigger kind of that send signals that, hey, listen, gets cortisol going. This is why we struggle to go to sleep when we look at our cell phones at night, because it's that artificial light. Our brains don't really know that, so it's going to slow down the melatonin, and it's going to cause us to be more alert, more awake. So this is why maybe you should put your cell phone, and we'll talk about that at the end as well. And if we look at our ancestors, they had an advantage because they didn't have all this artificial light, so they were able to sleep naturally. Well, we tend to be disrupted with that sleep. So just make sure you guys are aware of that. And just messes up your circadian rhythm with these lights. Now, how much we're sleeping, culture matters to how much we sleep. For example, us in the United States, we sleep less than somebody who's going to live maybe in more of a third world country. They get more sleep than us traditionally because they don't have all the disruptions. We're all about move. We're all about go. In the United States, Japanese culture, same thing. Western European countries, same thing. Where, we don't get as much sleep as our ancestors did 100 years ago. And again, you can thank light bulbs, you can thank work, you can thank internet, you can thank our cell phones, and you can thank Netflix and Amazon and music and video and HBO and everything else available to us. So this is going to disrupt our sleep. We're used to be going to sleep around, our ancestors go to sleep around 9 o'clock p.m. roughly. Now we're going to be sleeping around 11 p.m. So just understand that. And it's one thing that we can look at United States. Why are we gaining more weight? And that lack of sleep triggers that. We'll look at something called ghrelin, which is I am hungry kind of chemical in the brain, is going to uptick whenever we're actually not sleeping. So these are leptin and ghrelin. The less sleep, if you're up later, you're going to get late night appetite. You're going to tend to eat. And this is why they call it the freshman 15. You're on your own, first year of college. And this tends to lead to, actually it's closer to 4 pounds, not 15 pounds. But you do see us gain weight around 19 years old for those who go off to college. And at freshman 15, because you're not supervised, you're on your own more so, your parents are allowing you to stay up maybe later, and you're going to end up eating more. And then when you eat more, because this ghrelin chemical, you're going to obviously go to sleep, and your body's going to be kind of working through that food. You're not going to get quality sleep whenever you eat late either, which is going to affect you the next day. Won't be at your optimal. And that's what we need to be looking at. We need to be looking at how do we reach our optimal level of ourselves. And leptin actually suppresses appetite. And this is, again, when you get quality sleep, you get to bed earlier, you're going to not eat as much, and you won't gain that maybe 15 pounds or 4 pounds, as I mentioned. And next thing is when you lack sleep, it actually increases cortisol. We saw cortisol from Why Leaders Eat Last. And cortisol is that stress, fight or flight hormone. We're waking up, cortisol is good. It's good to have cortisol and at different times, get heightened every once in a while, but we don't want it long term. This stress, and again, this cortisol constantly dripping on the body, on the brain, is going to lead to possibly cancer, possibly some other things as well. Now, there's two types of people, three really types, but they call them larks and owls. And those in between are the hummingbirds. And we see a shift around the age of 20, but larks, these are the early risers. These are people who get up in the morning and are good to go. The night owls are the people who stay up late and they don't like getting up early in the morning. Larks tend to go to bed around 8, 9, 10 o'clock. The owls tend to go to bed around 11, 12, 1 o'clock or later. And we understand that we live in a world that favors the larks. The owls are much like your left-handers. Who live in a right-handers world. People tend to call the owls more typically lazy. There's somebody who's labeled as not as productive as larks. And again, it's because society is traditionally businesses open morning. It's morning time and shut down at night. And those who are in between are the hummingbirds. Larks make up about 40% of the population, majority. Owls are tended to be 30%, and then there's that in between. That's the hummingbirds who are in between. And again, genetics plays a role in this. And night owls tend to have greater ill health, depression, heart attacks, strokes, anxieties. And the positive though is night owls tend to be funnier people. They have better working memories and tend to be more creative. People born in the fall and the winter tend to be your larks. Those born in the spring and the summer tend to be the night owls. And that can be something to do, obviously, when spring and summer, the sun's out longer. And there's some kind of circadian rhythm, I guess, would be maybe a theory there with, since the sun's up longer, you're not going to have that drip of melatonin on the brain, adenosine on the brain. So as a result, you're going to stay up later, and there's the night owls. So just understand that. And anything else I'm trying to think of on this one. And by the way, I have 20-year-olds. We see a shift more so maybe to kind of transition to become more of a lark in your early mid-20s, where before maybe more of a night owl. Now, your larks would be your retirement home, would be a lark village, lark hangout, where people are quiet by mid-evening and people are sleeping by 9, 10 o'clock. Where your night owls, college campuses, people are going to be up until 11, 12, 1, 2 in the morning and try to sleep until 9, 10, 11, 12 in the afternoon. So this is more of an owl hangout. It's college dormitory. Do know that there's actually an evolutionary theory that the reason why teenagers tend to be more of night owls, we see a shift that you're more of a lark when you're a younger kid, but we shift to become more of a night owl in your teenage years is because you, evolutionary, as teenagers have to learn to live on your own. So where parents are going to bed, the teenagers are staying up later, learning that independence to take care of themselves. So there's a theory there on why that is, which I thought was fascinating. And we reminded there's a myth that older adults don't need to sleep as much because they're not consuming as much energy throughout the day, but that's not actually true. Older adults just tend not to sleep as well because when you get older, you get a weaker bladder. So you wake up more, you use the bathroom in the middle of the night more often. So you lose that sleep efficiency. You lose that ability to sleep as long, which this actually causes people to age faster when you get older. And this sleep disruption. And, you start seeing this memory and cognitive decline when you get older. And again, that could be a causation of not having enough sleep. You're more susceptible to get sick when you get older. And again, this is looking at maybe correlation here, this lack of sleep, and this forgetfulness, the impaired memory. Now, one thing, melatonin is that natural thing that helps us go to sleep on the brain. They don't tend to work for people your age, but they do tend to work for people that are elderly. That 60 plus range, they've actually had some positive impacts on. And I'm going to cut it off here. we'll pause it here. I'll make this part 1 and 35 minutes. And again, I want you to take some notes off of this, and we will get into part 2 here, which will finish it up.